But let's begin with a prayer. This is a prayer to Saint Joseph, model of laborers. Saint Joseph, when God wanted a family for his son, he looked among the laborers, the workers, and chose you along with Mary, demonstrating his esteem for human work. You put your heart into your work and shared your workshop with Jesus, God's own son. Your work, like that of other humans, found new meaning in the presence of God, sharing in God's creative power. Sustain us in the hope of finding work when we are confronted with the desolation of unemployment. Counsel business leaders to create an equitable division of labor that is respectful of individuals, promotes our growth and happiness, and provides just wages. Help us to perform our work joyfully, conscientiously, fairly, and honestly. Turn our hearts so that we can recognize and value the dignity of our colleagues at work. Help us always to see the work we do as an expression of our dignity as men and women created in your image and likeness. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Nice.
So we have two of our own here today. Very happy, and I have to mention that some weeks ago, Bill, you said, "Boy, if there's ever an opening, me and Devon would love to do this." Devon, I don't know if you knew at that point that you were being voluntold. But we're delighted to have both of these valued collaborators here with us today to share some of their personal stories and their experience. So let me just make a simple introduction, and then Bill, I'll turn it over to you. And then after your presentations, we'll have some time for Q&A and other reflections. So Bill Rhey, of course, is the Dean of the School of Business and Communications here at Chaminade University. Bill formerly served in similar positions at another university here, Hawaii Pacific, Florida Southern College, the University of Tampa, and Jacksonville University. So he brings considerable experience. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Bucknell, an MBA from Baylor, and a PhD from the University of Mississippi. Bill has worked in the automobile and wholesale paper industries as a staff representative for Navigators, Christian leadership organization, and as an independent market research consultant. Bill has 3 grown children and 6 growing grandchildren. And who knows, there may be more. And I bet you're a great grandfather. Devon Seward Howland is Employee Relations Coordinator and Career Advisor here at Chaminade. He spent previous years, 13 in the Bay Area, working at UC Berkeley, mainly as an internship coordinator, and then prior to that, as a college recruiter for Inroads, Bank of America, and Boeing. Devon has a BS in economics, an MA in human relations management, and is married with 2 children, a daughter in human resources and a son in physical therapy. So they're going to talk about some of their experiences. They're both men very conversant with the world of work and all the parts involved with that. And we'll reflect on their understanding of work and its personal and professional significance. So Bill and Devon, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing with us. We're really grateful. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. And Father Marty, this whole idea of share the joy, what a great theme. That is awesome. I was just sitting here earlier trying to think, what are the things that really bring us joy? And I'm sure that the students can think of some things. First thing that came to my mind was mint chocolate chip ice cream. That brings me joy. Seeing a smile on my granddaughter's face, that brings me joy. Looking out at Diamond Head out of my window, I get to work and look at Diamond Head. That is incredible joy. Now, I'm going to warn our students that Devon and I have a secret way of changing slides. You're not going to be able to figure this out. So. Devon, you're missing it. Oh, there you go. Yeah. So one of the things that you may not think of in terms of a source of joy is work. And, we think, oh, work, I got to go to work. Well, another day at the salt mine, and another day of labor, another day, another dollar. And oftentimes our perception of work is not one of real joy. And we think of work from our scriptural and Christian heritage. Sometimes we think, oh, if it wasn't for old Adam and Eve screwing up in the garden, we wouldn't have to do this. This is toil. And indeed, toil was a part of the fall. But let's take a look at what the real source of work is and what God has to say about it. So I'm just going to refer to a few verses in Genesis. So right from the beginning, this is God. And in verses 3 and 4, I'm going to put my glasses on so that I can read them. God said, let there be light, and the light appeared, and God saw how good it was. Okay, it was good. Verse 9 and 10. God said, let the waters under the sky come together. And God named the dry land earth, the gathered waters seas, and God saw how good it was. Verses 11 and 12. Let the earth grow plant life. And that's what happened. The earth produced plant life. Seeds, each according to its kind, trees bearing fruit, seeds inside the fruit, each according to its kind. So God saw how good it was. Verses 14 through 18. God said, let there be lights in the domes of the sky. And so God created the sun and the moon and the stars. And in verse 18, God saw how good it was. Verses 20 and 21. God created great sea animals and all tiny things and big things and everything swimming in the sea. And God looked and said, wow, that is good. Verses 24 and 25, God said, let the earth produce every kind of living thing, livestock, horses, lions, tigers, platypuses, sparrows, worms, everything. And God looked after he was done and said, how good it was. And then God said, let's make humanity. Verses 27 through 31, God created humanity. And as Father Marty has already said in his prayer, in God's own image, in the divine image, God created them male and female. And then he said, all right, I'm going to give you guys some tasks. You're going to manage over all of this. You're going to be good environmentalists. You're going to be good with regard to sustainability. You're going to be stewards of all that I've created. And in verse 31, God saw everything that he had made, and it was really good. It was supremely good. So God, wait for it now, again, 131, God saw everything he has made, and it was extremely good. And if you look in chapter 2, verse 2, now it was guys like Father Marty in the past that wrote this stuff down, put all these chapter numbers in, but this is a continuous story. And on the sixth day, so on the sixth day, God completed all the what? All the work that he had done. And on the seventh day, God rested from what? From the work that he had done. So what had God been doing from the beginning? God was working. It was part of his natural character. It was part of the women woof of who he was, and it was imparted into man and woman, his nature and character, and the goodness of work. So work started way before the fall. It was part of the nature and character of God. It was his expectation for us. It was part of the good things that we could do and contribute to our world. So I want to tell you just a short story. When I was, this about 50 years ago, my friend and I bought 2 ship hatch covers from the docks in New Jersey. They were from old Liberty ships. And these were about the size of tabletops, covered with grime, all scarred, all rusty. And so we took and ground down the tabletops until you could see the fine wood, the fine grain in this pine. We grinded down the handles so that the stainless steel was shiny. And then we cut the timber and lumber, designed it, measured it, made legs for the tables. And then we put coats of different types of stains on the table and covered that with varnish and covered that with some type of a plexiglass or type of coating. And when we got done, we stood back and it was amazing. These were beautiful tables. These tables would cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars today. And it was the work of our hands. And we felt this sense of completeness. And it makes sense to me what God said when he was done, creating the world. He stood back and said, wow, that is good. There's a sense of completeness. And it was the same sense of goodness in terms of the work that I had when I did that table. And the same sense that maybe you get when you get an A on an exam that you've studied particularly hard for, or when you grow a garden and it actually produces the tomatoes and the cucumbers that it was designed to produce, or when you're doing a balance sheet as an accountant and the numbers come out correctly, or when you're teaching a student and the student gets it and the light comes on for the first time. It's a completeness. There's a joy in doing what God has designed us to do in his own nature and character.
That's cool.
I better take my glasses off. There we go. So there's a bunch of cheesy looking pictures of people that's supposed to be from the scripture, but the idea here is that there isn't any one line of work, any one kind of work that's better than others. Adam and Eve had pretty good jobs in the garden, and this, believe me, was before the fall, before the apple incident. Adam and Eve were tending the garden. They had a beautiful garden, so they were gardeners. They also had some creative jobs to do. So they had a marketing job in terms of branding and position. They had to name the animals. I imagine they may have gotten into some fights. And Adam said, that's a tiger. No, that's a lion. No. Anyway, they got it all done, and they had some creative work, and it was a joy. Moses spent time being a shepherd. It was an honorable profession. Joshua was a general. Esther was royalty. She was a queen. Daniel didn't spend most of his time taming lions, but he was a bureaucrat in one of the largest governments in the world. And Jesus himself, and I love Father Marty's prayer about Jesus coming as a worker. Jesus learned to work. He learned to be a carpenter under Joseph. He learned what it was like to plan and to execute and to complete work. He knew what it was to have the joy of work. And Luke was a doctor. Paul spent some time as a tent maker. There are all kinds of professions, all of which are valuable, and all of which make a contribution to our own opportunity to better ourselves, to make better lives for our families, for our communities, and for our society. So little experience from my own life. I've done everything. There's an old Johnny Cash song, I've been everywhere, man. I think I've done everything. I've driven dump trucks. I've washed dishes. I've been a film editor. I even worked in the marijuana field, believe it or not. I've done marketing. I've been a manager. I've been a laborer. I've been a marketing professor, and I've been a dean. And the truth of the matter is, in every one of those opportunities, God's given me the gifting to be able to do the job, complete it, say it's good, give him thanks for the joy of being able to work in order to feed myself and maybe make those around me a little bit better. So it really doesn't matter what area God has called you to. Maybe being a carpenter, a doctor, maybe being a member of the World Surf League, maybe being a data analyst or a clerk or a worker in a warehouse, a teacher, maybe a botanist, a scientist, whatever. God has called us to whatever we are skilled and gifted and called to do it with excellence and to do it as unto him in order to be examples, shining examples in this world as those who have responsibility, not only for ourselves, but for our communities and those around us. And so it's work, toil, well, sometimes it's hard, but it's a gift and it's a joy. And I love this out of the book of Ecclesiastes. If you're familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, the theme is like this: wow, under the sun, in this world, under the sun, apart from heaven, everything is toilsome. Everything that we, there's weariness in reading a lot of books. I tried drinking, that didn't work. I tried smoking dope. Well, maybe he doesn't say that, but the idea is stuff like that doesn't work. I sought fame, that doesn't work. And out of everything that the writer of Ecclesiastes talks about, the only thing that brings satisfaction is work. So he says, what do workers gain from their toil? That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction. That is the gift from God. And my brother Devon left me with this verse from Nehemiah: the joy of the Lord is your strength. And you know what the context of that was? So Nehemiah, of course, was a wine taster for the king, but this was in the midst of him being a developer and an engineer and a builder. It's hand me another brick in the hard work of building a wall. Nehemiah acknowledges the joy of work and the joy of the Lord being our strength. Okay, Devon. Conclusion, big idea, work is good. So look forward to work in the future, enjoy and celebrate the work that God's given you to do right now. And with that, my brother Devon's going to take us a little bit deeper into some particulars. Take it away.
Thank you so much. That was enjoyable. And I have to think that maybe in those fields you never inhaled, but that's okay. We'll talk about that another day. All right. So this is me. This is my family. My wife, far left, daughter and son. My daughter went to UH and graduated in their TIM school. Now she works in human resources for Aloha Air Cargo. My son went to school for physical therapy. He finished his doctorate and now he's a physical therapist in Chicago. They are the pride of my life, and I'm extremely happy for them, about them. They're putting their education to good use and able to work and earn a living. And as a result, they're not living with us anymore. So they're able to pay for their own way and pay for their own transportation and meals and food. And, there was a time where, my daughter stayed with us a little bit, but, she's trying to figure it out. But the whole circle of life of having kids, seeing them grow up, and then seeing them go out and find their way to work is a joy. And the interesting thing about it is, at any one point, you may not feel very joyful. At any one point along the way, in school, looking for work, studying for a test, it may not feel particularly joyful. But when you look back, you can reflect on how things have changed. And in fact, looking back is the very thing I want to talk about a lot. So as I look back on my life, I was born in a small town called Joliet, Illinois. It's only famous for the big prison in town and the Blues Brothers movie, I guess. But I went to 4 different high schools. I grew up without dad and mom being together. I grew up with mom. I saw dad maybe 3 times until the age of 13, where I spent a week with him. And then, it was just a very difficult time. But for me all along, education was my outlet. And when things were rough, I just poured myself into school. That was the place that I guess I found acceptance, and I found that good behavior could be rewarded. And so I did good. And when I did good, more good happened. And so as I reflect back on that, I see how important education was in my life. And my mom, for the most part, had steady work, but there were sometimes she didn't. There were sometimes we were on food stamps. There were sometimes we lived in public housing and had food stamps. But she had a work ethic, and I learned from her. She worked when she could find work. And I looked at my schooling as if I was doing my part. And my part was to do the best I could in my education. And because I got positive results, it was self-reinforcing. Won't tell you all the details of my life, but essentially, when I went to college, actually, I grew up in and out of the Catholic Church. I just never went through catechism. But when I went to college, I was met by some people, and we studied the Bible, and it became more real and genuine and just kind of apparent to me then, more than it had ever been before. And one of my favorite scriptures there is in 2 Corinthians. And essentially, I learned things at that point in the Bible that I hadn't seen before, even though I had read it before. And it just made more sense to me at that point. And I was able to make some decisions that I stuck to for the rest of my life. And in a sense, I feel like those decisions have been more important than anything else because they opened me up to what life had to offer. And I think they shaped my world, they shaped who I am, they shaped who other people are to me, and then they shaped what I'm doing. And so these things have influenced, I believe, the kind of person I am and the kind of things I feel invested in doing. So as I thought about work, I studied economics. I got really interested in a subcategory called labor economics, which led me into something called human resources in terms of organizational behavior. At the same time, I worked on campus in our career center, lo and behold, and liked doing that. I liked helping students figure out what they wanted to do. And then I liked working with employers who were looking for students. And so I was helping them find students, and I was helping students find them. And I felt like that was just the most enjoyable thing I could do. And so I said, that's the job I want. And I was able to, fortunately, get into that kind of work. And it opened up so many doors. And essentially, one of the things that they valued, my first job was at Boeing, was lifelong learning and the idea of continuous development. And so those are things that were as important to me as anything, because I saw that we always need to grow. And going from going from college into work allowed me to continue my education. And in fact, the first job I had was over tuition reimbursement in St. Louis, Missouri for that location. And so there were like 25,000 employees in my division, and a lot of them were encouraged to go back and get their education while they were working. So this meant Boeing was paying for them to go to school, to get their advanced degrees, or in some cases, to get their first degrees. And so I was able to write those checks and help those employees to do that. And that was extremely gratifying to see people make this next step or important step in their life. So the work of human resources was something that I just found myself really excited about. Every day was different. I was able to see this wide view of the company, from the average employee or the person who just started yesterday to the CEO. And I got to, be visible to all different levels of the organization. At the same time, something that was really interesting is I got to take us places that maybe other people in my job wouldn't, because of my interests, because of the things that I was passionate about. I partnered with the St. Louis Public Schools, and we created a Science and Technology Day. And that had never been done by the company, but I was able to get their resources to go do that and partner with different departments and divisions to put that on, where we brought high school students in, and there was mentoring and all things like that. And, me and an employee started this program, and long after I left, this program was still going on. And so I felt like, that was a great way for me to have an impact with my work. So now that I'm here at Chaminade, I've tried to learn from the lessons, the different places that I've worked along the way. And the things I'm trying to incorporate in my job now are a reflection of what I've learned in my work life. And so I've been in the private sector, I've been in nonprofit, and I've been in education. And one of the things that we've done is adopt two themes. And one of those themes I'm going to talk about, and that's this one, the power of your story. And so as I think about your resume and your cover letter and your application and even your interview, all of those kind of focus on your ability to tell your own story. And so one of the things I want to help our students understand is that once you know your story, once you understand your story has power and your story has influence. And you've got an opportunity to tell your story on paper with that resume and in person with that interview in ways that can be really compelling. And as a college recruiter, I would go out to campuses, talk to students, collect resumes, bring those resumes back and present them to hiring managers. And, sometimes I kind of think, oh, well, I'm pretty sure this guy's going to get hired. But when you go through those interviews, anything can happen. And sometimes what I found was the person who could really tell a convincing story was the person that got hired. And so what I want to help students understand is your story has power because your story has truth. It has your truth. It is what's been important to you in your life. And your life is unique. Each one of us is different and brings something different to the table, and we get to represent that. You represent your family. You represent your hometown. You represent your high school. You represent your community, right? Your city or your state or your country in some cases. And each of us bring these different things to the table. And so when you're talking about ways to work, I believe the intersection of education and what you're going to do has everything to do with who you are and what you bring to the table and what you can do for the world. And so the other major theme that comes from that is just the idea of, my story being one who's overcome so much, or maybe having influential people in my life that kind of gave me directions. Or I could tell the story about how, I'm the guy who got that one chance, but that chance allowed me to do great things. And so there's all different ways that I could tell my story to influence my audience. I could talk about how, I grew up without a dad around, and I had a lot of lonely times and a lot of times of looking out the window and wondering why me, and why is this going on with me? And I see other kids with their parents and the mutual support. And the thing that I committed to myself going through that process was that I would never be that kind of dad to my own kids, that I would make sure that I was always there. And so I could tell the story that way and tell people how whenever my kids had soccer or whenever my kids had performances, I was always there for them. Whenever they had graduations, whenever they had birthday parties, I was always there for them. They never went without because I knew what that was like. Can't you see how powerful that can be when you tell that from your own personal point of view? So these are ways that I want people to understand that your story has so much power and influence. Or I could talk about, I grew up and didn't have any resources at all. I took French and German in high school, and I wanted to eventually go abroad and actually use those languages in those countries. But I'm a poor kid from a small rural town in Illinois. How am I ever going to do that? And then finally, I got a job, actually, when I went out to the Bay Area at Berkeley with a company that actually was based in London. And because of that, I had peers in London and in Paris and in Madrid and in Geneva. And I was able to actually go abroad because of this job. And I got to actually have them pay for it, which was awesome. So, I mean, here you've got this kind of poor kid with modest background, able to kind of do all these things internationally and go places and, have other people pay for it and all this great stuff. Ultimately, how you tell your story can make the difference, right? So I could talk about the various educational institutions I went to. I could talk about the terrific employers in education that I've been able to work for. I could also talk about the Fortune 500 companies and the top of mind organizations that I've been able to work for. It's been an absolutely amazing life if I consider all that I've been able to do in work. And I'd like to inspire students and let them know that I'm just an average person. You can absolutely do this too. Let me show you how. And so that's why I feel compelled to do this kind of work. Partially because I'm extremely ecstatic and satisfied when I help students figure out what they want to do, and partially just because I want to see how far they can go, because I feel like I want to be a role model and help you see that you can go even further than I have. So another theme that we have in the career services is the idea of finding your way. And I really believe that, as you try to negotiate your way through high school and then the college, that this message of finding your way is a very important theme. And so one of the things we want to see here is students finding their way. We want to have alumni come back and talk about how they found their way and inspire you, because we believe that every person's on a path towards their future, that every person has purpose and value, and that everyone can find meaning in their work, because we are all here to find our path. And that's ultimately what, going to college is a part of, that we're all here to find our own purpose and values, that we want you to find work, but meaningful work that adds to the good going on in the world. We also want you to understand that you're going to feel most satisfied, not necessarily with the biggest check, but when you find a need that you can meet. And we believe that this dovetails exactly with the Marinus values, that the idea of you taking your talents and gifts and using to your good use, but also to the world's good use, will actually benefit you and society. So ultimately, one of the things I'm trying to launch is this idea of the 4 plans. The plan of life, a life plan, your academic plan, a vocational plan, and a career plan. And one of the things I really want to help our Chaminade students do is start out as freshmen with these 4 plans and see them grow and develop as they find their way here, as they learn how to tell their story, so that when they leave here, they can follow through on those plans and put them into work, whether it's going directly into grad school or maybe going into find work in some fashion. Because in the end, I believe in the difference that an educated person can make. For me, that's what college is all about. It's a very empowering, transformative process that all students are going through. That ultimately, if you believe it, I think you're bringing light into dark places. I think that you are bringing order to disorder. I think that education allows you to overcome fear, ignorance, and injustice. And ultimately, no matter what your major is, whether you're a nursing major, whether you're an English major, or whether you're a forensics major, you're applying your learning to solving problems. And ultimately, we want to help you figure out how to use the skills and abilities you learn here at Chaminade to do these very things. So I'm really excited to do this kind of work. I'm really enthusiastic to help students. I've been meeting students this week one-on-one and setting up talks with them to kind of help them figure out what they want to do, what their career is going to be like once they leave here, helping people put plans together, helping people connect with employers or connect with graduate school. So we're really excited to help you launch yourself so that you can get joy from work. We believe that that's going to be the next best step that each one of you can take. With that, I'll stop sharing and open up for questions.
You're on mute there, Father Marty.
Sorry. Thanks so much, Bill and Devon. I think you've just demonstrated why we're really fortunate to have both of you on this campus. And listening to the joy that work can bring, but also a sense of service and a sense of empowering others, very much reflective of our Marinist method of education here. Had one question from Fina. And she said you've both experienced joy in work. And who were some of your inspirations or role models along the way? Who were the people that you looked to, who helped you to develop this kind of approach to life? Maybe Bill, we could start with you. Bill, you have to unmute.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, I haven't used Zoom before.
What century are you
What's that?
living in?
That's right. Zoom, what's that?
Oh, that is such a good question. Thank you. I was thinking about that just for a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure there are a whole lot of people, but I will say that in the recent past, the two people that have been most influential in my life and that I'm most thankful for are people that in some ways were polar opposites of me, but they were both people of character. One was my former provost at HPU, who came out of retirement to serve a year as an interim provost. She grew up in Hawaii. She went to, unlike me, she went to an Ivy League school. She went to Punahou and an Ivy League school. I went to public schools and not to anything so prestigious as an Ivy League school. She is a very liberal Democrat. I'm a conservative Republican. And yet I learned so much from her about empowerment, about kindness, about being able to have a clear vision with a friendly and joyous spirit. She enjoyed her work. She trusted and she was transparent. She had great vision. She had incredible ethics. She believed in people. She gave people the ability to achieve within their own frame of skills and abilities and believed that they could do it. I just love that woman so much today, and she'll be a counselor for me until the day that I die. And previous to that was someone very similar. He was the first business dean that I worked for that I had a real friendship with. And like this provost, this fella was a graduate of a University of Pennsylvania, Wharton, Ivy League school. I didn't come from an Ivy League school. He had class. I'm a Western Pennsylvania boy, blue collar. I don't know that I had much class, but he came out of, he had served in a high administrative position at Emory University. Again, I had come from much more humble circumstances. But in the same way, he was transparent. He believed in me. He was an encourager. He gave me opportunities. He gave me support. He nominated me for positions and encouraged me in positions. He was just an amazing mentor, an amazing friend. And it would just be my hope that there was someone in some small way that I could influence the same way that those two have influenced me.
Very good. Thanks very much, Bill. Devon, could you reflect on the same?
Sure. Lots of people. I want to start with my parents. I mean, my mom and my father in many ways impacted me in so many ways. And I remember my freshman year of college, calling my mother and just thanking her. I didn't even know I was going to say it. It just came out, but I just wanted to thank her for everything she'd done to get me where I was. And I saw how much she contributed and how important that was to me at that time. But there's been so many other people, many pivotal people. But one that comes to mind is somebody that was on my campus as an undergrad, and he was a vice president of administrative services. And he was an African-American man. He's had his PhD in math. He had been an instructor, but then was in administration. And he took me in and took me under his belt. And wow, he was a part of this professional organization, and I was able to do some things with that. I became a student worker in his office. I ended up traveling around the state in talking to other campuses about careers. I mean, this guy gave me a platform that nobody else would have, and he was just tremendous. And interestingly, just a few years ago, I was able to go back to my college town and connect with him and just tell him thank you. And I showed him pictures, the same pictures I shared here of my kids, and let him know how grateful I was that he had done so much at that time to pull me out of obscurity and put me on this platform and give me an opportunity to do things that really no other student on campus was able to do. I was just amazing, driving around in the, university car up and down the state of Illinois, giving talks, it was just amazing. Anyway, yeah, those people come to mind.
Okay, thanks very much. Makes me aware once again from what both of you said, how people opening doors for other people in our chosen vocations, empowering people, it's transformative, but it's also very much reflective of our Marianist approach to education, empowering, opening doors, being inclusive, helping students to get beyond where they are at a particular time. I wondered if maybe both of you could also reflect on what role your faith life plays. Now you touched on it, but I wonder if you could just focus on a little bit. What role does your faith commitment have in the kinds of work that you do and how you have embraced a certain career? Bill, could you start with that?
Yeah, sure. Like Devon, and I'm sure like you, Father, my faith life isn't separated from my work life. It's my life. And so Christ is at the center, and all things are in balance around that, including work and family and fun, all things in balance around the centrality of Christ and knowing him and walking with God. So at the end of the day, this is, we live in the kingdom. We're servants of the kingdom. We have a king. The kingdom is everywhere. It's not limited by geography. And the king that we serve is the one that we answer to. So in a very real sense, when I come to work every day, I want to be the very best dean that I can be. And that doesn't mean I'm going to be the best dean in the world, because maybe I'm not equipped to be the best dean in the world, but I'm going to be the best dean that I can be for the honor of God. I don't know if you remember watching the movie Chariots of Fire when, who was the main character? Eric Liddell was talking to his sister, and he was saying, when I run, I feel his power, and I run for his glory. That's the way I feel about the blessings that I've been given to be able to do the things that I do in life. I do it because God has called me to it. He's gifted me to do it. And I do it because I feel his joy in the things that I do. So really no separation from faith, and it's all part of who we are in the kingdom.
Thanks. Devon?
Thank you. I was just kind of remember one of my favorite scriptures, and it's Psalm 119, verse 9. How can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your word. And I think that, for me, I found that on the one hand, education is great, but without sort of the scriptural foundation, education alone is not enough. You don't get people who have the right ethics and values. But then scripture without education finds people who aren't necessarily grounded in reality as much as they can be. But by having both of those, you're really equipped for the world. And so I'm really excited about working here. I've worked at a couple of other universities, but one of the things that I'm just excited about is that here you can bring your faith into the classroom, that can be a part of what you you do, and you can be the full person that you are. And I think it's exciting that our students are really active with Jeremiah and the campus ministry, and that's an active part of what they're doing, why they choose Chaminade. And I just think that's a special thing that we are able to do here. That's great.
Thanks very much. Another student had a question that was similar to one I was thinking about. How do you continue having a passion for your work and for your position when it is very stressful? You know, we hear a lot about burnout and so on. How do you maintain that, especially in situations where there is tremendous pressure and stress?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, please, Bill.
Father Marty, I was afraid that you were going to say, how do you continue to find a passion for work when you're so old? And I was immediately formulating an answer for that. But, yeah, you know.
Well, that can be stressful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my answer to that would be, I think there's stress in all of life, right? And we are called to live in a balance, and a certain degree of stress is actually necessary. So it was explained to me once, it's like a violin. If you don't have enough tension on the strings, you can't play music. If you tighten it too much, it snaps. But there's got to be tension on it in order to have the right amount of music. So of course there's tension and there's frustration. And I think it's an excellent question. I don't claim to have the answer. I look at so many biblical examples. Jesus certainly was stressed to the point of sweat and blood, and you know that was no fun. And Daniel was probably pretty stressed when those lions were looking at him, and having to make decisions in such an ungodly kingdom. And yet God had them in those circumstances. So I think the answer to that question is, you know, at some point, there have been plenty of times I prayed like Jesus, God, please take me away from these circumstances if possible. But sometimes God would have you walk through the lion's den and go through the valley of the shadow of death and work through the stress. But I think that the true answer to that question is that in the midst, yea, though I walk through the valley of stress, I fear no evil, because the peace of God is in our hearts. And despite the consequences, God expects us to walk in obedience to him, and that's success. Success isn't necessarily obtaining the goals of the organization. Success is having the confidence and the good conscience of knowing that you're walking with God. And that brings inner peace.
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing exactly what you said, because I think there's a scripture in Hebrews that talks about nobody lacking correction at the time, but in the end it produces, you know, harvest of righteousness, or things that are beneficial. And I think you're right. We do live in that tension, and nobody wants the tension, but it actually is the tension that produces the results. College is tension, right? Work is tension, but it's learning how to be in these moments and use what abilities and gifts we have that actually we find our strengths, right? So you wouldn't find your strengths if there wasn't tension that brought them out and brought them into being. So it seems sort of counterintuitive, but the very things that seem a little challenging actually bring out the best in us and cause us to be the better person we can be. So Paul would say, you know, we should embrace that. It's pretty hard to embrace it, but it is enough to know that you're going to go through seasons where things are tougher and sometimes where things aren't. And as a student, you can realize, you know, not every day is a test, not every day is a final. And, you know, thankfully we have those in between times. But know that whatever you're doing is preparing you to get through whatever stressful moment is coming. And apparently we've, you know, all decided that it's this COVID thing is, you know, going to be a thing, and we have to figure out how to move through it. And I just want to encourage all the students that are still in college and sticking with it, that this is a time of stress that later you're going to look back on and say, well, I did that, right? And your future interviews are going to be, what was it like going through the pandemic, and how did you survive? And that's a future interview question. So write that down.
Good. Devon, you mentioned in the four elements that you're putting together or have put together, education for vocation, education for profession. Now, those two words tend to get conflated in many people's minds. I wonder if both of you could just reflect on how you would see, or what is the difference between a profession and a career and a vocation? Because we talk here a lot about vocation, helping students find their vocation in life that is mirrored in the kind of career that they have. But what might be the distinction between them? Bill or Devon, either one?
If you don't mind, I'll just jump in because I know our time is short. I did a little bit of research on this summer and checked out a number of colleges that are doing some work in this and tried to kind of benchmark them and learn best practices. So essentially, your profession could be the area of the intersection of your interests, your abilities, and your strengths, whereas your vocation could be that place where you want to meet a need that's out in the world, where you have a particular calling, a particular desire to do something to lead to a certain solution. Sometimes those things can be not polar opposites, but very different and distinct. I've got a background in certain skills that make me an accountant, but I have a passion for Make-A-Wish Foundation because what they do is great stuff. So I'm going to be an accountant, but on the side, I'm going to volunteer for Make-A-Wish because I can get some great things done there. On the other hand, my skills might be working with people and counseling them, and my passion might be leading them to Christ. So now I'd consider, different things in the ministry and different callings that way. So sometimes they're complementary, sometimes they're not, but I think that my goal is to help people figure out what those are. I'll leave it at that.
Bill?
What he said. I don't have it that nearly so well defined and articulated, but I will just jump in and say that we don't always have the opportunity to follow our real passion. So you may hear people say you can do anything you want to do, and I'm kind of roll my eyes at that. My son is 5'7", wanted to be a professional basketball player. That wasn't going to happen, and sometimes God calls us to things that aren't necessarily our first choice. So if you take a look at Paul had a real heart. His heart's desire was to serve his own people, to reach his own ethnic group and race, to reach the Jews, and yet God called him to the Gentiles. So he had a little different job description than maybe he exhibited in terms of his heart's passion. I can remember thinking that the one thing I wanted to do in life was to sell airplanes. And I wanted to work as a marketing representative for Cessna. So I get to Chaminade and I find out that our department head in communications spent years as a marketing head for Cessna. I was so jealous. and yet, by the grace of God, I've been able to be in a profession that's allowed me to have the opportunity to contribute to the lives of people who will be able to influence others, who will be able to influence others also. And there couldn't be a more meaningful investment. So I know that didn't exactly answer your question, but it's the things that we think we want to do aren't necessarily the things that will end up making the best contributions to.
If I could add to this, if you go, I could share the presentation if anybody wants it, but if you look at all the jobs Bill has had, it's just a great example of this, right? And so we really want students to know that, just because you're this major doesn't mean you just have this opportunity. There's so many different things that life will throw at you and doors that are going to open. So I just want everyone to understand he had like 30 different things there on that list that he's done. And it's just tremendous. And I want students to understand that can be you. However, if you want to just do one thing, you can do that as well.
I once heard the explanation of a vocation as my passion that meets an unmet need in our world. Now, I think, Bill, as you said, sometimes those coincide. You know, if I have a passion to help people and I become a nurse, you know, those things can coincide. And that's why our students are so lucky, because they're in positions to make those kinds of choices, to try to determine their passion, what they really want to do in this world to make it a better world, and then what kinds of positions can they get into. But as we know, lots of people don't have that choice. They don't have the skills, they don't have the freedom, and they have to take what they can do. And sometimes people are in very menial jobs that are low paying, all of those kinds of things. But that's where our students are really lucky. And the challenge for them is to try to determine what can they do with their life and their education here at Chaminade to really make this world a better place. Last question, or last comment that I would make, two other aspects that I think would be good to mention, and this is for our students in particular. Another kind of work is our inner work. In other words, the work involved in growing as a human being and in becoming an adult. That takes time and effort and a lot of inner work. That's work. And also, listening to both of you, parenting is work. And that is as important, and maybe more important in the long run, than a particular career that we might have, because that's 24/7, that's everything you can take if it's done well. And that in itself is also a vocation. So, Jeremiah, let me give you the last word for any announcements that you want to make.
Feel free to, I don't have any slides or anything to show right now, but feel free to check us out on our social media and all the upcoming events that are going to be taking place. It's going to be a busy month and a half. We're seeing this last little bit of school, and it's hard to believe, but there's not a lot of time left, but there's a lot of things that's going on. In particular, I want to point out next week we're preparing for Easter. It's Holy Week. And so I just encourage everyone to continue their journey so far, leading up to Easter during this time of Lent. Whatever practices and disciplines that you've set for yourself to really celebrate the joy of Easter. We will have all the Holy Week liturgies, but one of the first things, so this Sunday is Palm Sunday. Everyone please come for Palm Sunday and the starting of the Lord's Passion. But then on Monday, we do have in the evening a penance service or reconciliation service. So for those who are interested in coming to that, that's going to be in the evening at 6:30, I believe, Father, right?
6:30.
And 6:30 at the Mystical Rose Oratory for those who are Catholic, or for those who are non-Catholic and they want to go in for a confession and be able to just get some things off their chest. That's a great opportunity to do that before Easter. Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Vigil on Saturday and Sunday, all on the events calendar to check out and sign up for. We have Eventbrite links for that. So if you want to join us and make sure that we save space for you, that'll be a great thing. Right after that, real quickly, will be Founders Week. So we'll be celebrating our founders of the Marianist Order and also of the university. It's going to be a great week. We have plenty of things that's going on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through. But we have Founders Day Mass that we're going to also recognize the Heritage Award winners that same week. That'll be on Wednesday. So Easter, Holy Week coming up next week. The week after that will be Founders Week and events. Just check out the events calendar for all those things that's going on, and along with all our other departments, check them out as well with OSEL and all the activities that they'll be doing. Like I said, a lot of things going on. I just want to end by saying, again, thank you so much, Bill, Rhey, Devon. Thank you guys for just sharing your joy with us. A wealth of knowledge. I think Devon and Bill will be more than happy to send their presentation if there's some things that spoke to you, some joy that was in there, and some knowledge and wisdom. I think they'll be very happy to get that to you. So just email me or email them, and we'll get that for you guys. Aside from that, thank you all for joining again. Father Marty, if there's anything else you want to end with, but I just want to say thank you so much, Bill, Rhey, and Devon, for sharing those good things in your life that hopefully will continue to bring joy in our lives, especially this joy of work that we're all part of. There's a good work in each and every one of us, and only each and every one of us has the ability to do it, and God gives us that ability. So get going, working, and keep it up, and all again.
Thank you. Thanks very
All
much.
right.
Okay.
God bless, guys. Thank you.
Cheers.